And good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending upon where you are on this rotating, warming globe. Welcome to another edition tonight, Saturday, April 12th, of The Other Side of Midnight. That magical time between dusk and dawn where, well, tonight we're going to be considering something that a lot of people would think of as either science fiction or more likely science fantasy, or maybe even just fantasy. But given that there are so many unusual, really remarkable and out of the box, as they used to say, things going on, I mean, come on, why not? Why not? As the White Queen, you said in Alice in Wonderland, I make it a practice of trying to think of 6 impossible things before breakfast. Well, it's well after breakfast, so why not, 7? Tetrahedral 7. What you do is you go to theothersideofmidnight.com, that's our URL, and you click on tonight's banner, which says very grandly, and this is going to be an interesting conversation, The Ancient Architects of Orion, with Jonathan Womack, who was a colleague and friend. And John has a very interesting background. In fact, for those of you who are new to the show, let me give you a few pointers. He is an astral Samaritarian, and we'll probably get into what that means. He's a psi-archaeologist, a musician, an award-winning author, a film producer, and many other. He's basically a generalist. Okay, he began his experiences in leaving his body. Yes, you heard me right. In the fall of 1965, after watching an episode of the sci-fi series Lost in Space. A year later, Jonathan found his calling after watching the premiere of the Saturday morning cartoon, The New Adventures of Superman, as he donned an astral cape and leotards when he began receiving psychic distress alarms from people and from spirits. And then in 1968, during a family vacation to Colorado, Jonathan was struck by the appearance of ancient ruins and monuments, and 5 decades then passed as he evolved and expanded his metaphysical scope, answering alarms and clearing traumatized sites such as Ground Zero in New York City. In the summer of 2021, after viewing images presented on an episode of The Other Side of Midnight, Jonathan was again struck by clear evidence of ruins, monuments, portals, sphinxes, spires, and murals in, of all places, Arches National Monument in Arches Park, Utah. Jonathan has committed himself to dispelling the myth and conditioning of interesting erosion in the American Southwest, in Aluya, in Saudi Arabia, and other sculpted regions around the world, as well as the planetary art currently being discovered on the Martian surface. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland, and when we return, we're going to tackle another subject of dubious background and official confirmation, that is the sculpture of planet Earth itself by powers and beings perhaps so immense and beyond current science imagination to break down the barrier between fact and fiction. We shall return. And welcome back, everyone, on this edition of The Other Side of Midnight for Saturday, April 12th. So let me introduce my friend, psi-researcher and documentary filmmaker, among many other things, Jonathan Womack. Because John tonight is going to regale us with an extraordinary, absolutely out of the box, mind-boggling, what other superlatives can I use, theory. That basically life in 3D, certainly life on planet Earth, is not like we have imagined it at all. I mean, at all. It's a theory big enough, maybe to explain in the ultimate what could be going on. Maybe. So, Jonathan, welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight.
Thanks for having me, Richard. It's good to be here.
I'll tell you what, for people who are new to the show and certainly new to your work, I'd like you to start with a kind of a synopsis of this model, this theory, and then we'll get into the details of how you come to it, the kind of data you've looked at, the information you run by me and several other people. But I want you to start with the big meta idea. What's the underpinning model that we're going to spend the next 3 hours or 2.5 hours talking about tonight?
Well, my model suggests that the entire universe is a big art gallery. I think of our solar system now as a national park, or all the planets are national parks. That's how we should treat them, because it's all artwork. And we are meant to see the art, but we have been conditioned to see it as pareidolia. So I've got a tough hill to climb here to convince people that it's not pareidolia. We're actually meant to see it, and that this artwork evolves us as humans.
Well, when you say it's going to be a tough hill to climb, I'm not so sure, because in the so-called real world, nobody can count on anything. I mean, when people start selling T-bills, which for over 100 years have been the rock bottom financial security of everybody on the planet, I mean, everything is up for grabs. So, let's, as my grandmother would have said, let's assume the sale. Start with the idea that what we're talking about is not bizarre and off the wall, but in fact is merely so big and so encompassing that up until now, we've not had enough accumulated evidence to even begin to think this big.
That's correct. That's a good way to put it. What happened with me was I was watching the show in August of 2021, and the subject of the show was the Utah monolith, and Keith had listed some pictures from his Utah vacation in Arches Park. He shows a picture of Park Avenue. This place has become my second home, balanced rock, and I'm going, holy smokes. And then it was really the picture of delicate arch, which I'd never seen before. That picture, which is my item number one, that picture just really drove it home that I'm looking at something that's beyond my comprehension, but I know there's something very profound here. And I just got this Sherlock Holmes obsession where I needed to find out what this was.
Okay, so your investigation really began with a show which showed some of Keith's vacation imagery?
Yeah, so the next 18 months, I was more or less just obsessed with this, or just very driven to get to the bottom of it. 18 months go by. It was January of 2023. And I'm sitting at my desk, it's late at night, and I'm getting ready for bed, and I'm looking at delicate arch, and I'm feeling very frustrated because I cannot understand what this arch is, and I see faces, but they change, and I can't pinpoint any particular face. It changes from day to day, and so I know there's something very profound. I'm on the cusp of discovering something, but very frustrated. So I feel.
Well, hang on. As a background, you're what I would term a sensitive.
Yes.
meaning someone who walks in two worlds, a 3D that most people occupy 24/7, but you also have demonstrated abilities to peek over the edge or behind the mirror or through the portal or across the transom into this hyperdimensional world where the laws are not exactly the same as they are here, and that information can come to you in a kind of a shifting, hard to pin down fashion that then you can spend a lot of time in 3D accumulating evidence to back up what you're sensing or
Yeah.
apprehending directly through this other part of you.
Yes, I feel them around me. The more I was studying this art, I can feel their presence. So I know they're here and I feel like they're encouraging me or giving me the pat on the back kind of thing. Just keep going, keep going. And yeah, that night I'm getting ready for bed. I just asked them. I just out loud and I look up and say, just show me. I mean, you guys are killing me here. So I go to bed and I lie down and a minute later I'm out and about. I'm flying through space in a lucid dream, and it's very beautiful and peaceful. Really, it's a favorite thing to do is fly through space. There's nothing like it. So, flying along, minding my own business, and I see off to my right these three beings come flying along, and I understand that they stop. They match my speed and direction, and I look over at them. They're 60, 80 feet away. I can't see their faces clearly, but it's three kind of humanoid looking people. And I understand that they're here. They heard me and they're here to show me. So, hey, ready? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm ready. I was born ready. Let's go. And off we go. Rush of motion. We come to the first planet, which I believe I didn't recognize any of these planets that they showed me because I thought we might have been at Sirius or Mintaka or some place far away. It turns out we're in our own solar system. So we go to this planet and we're looking at this. It's a moon, actually, and looking at it from a distance. Clearly, I see the whole side of this planet as a big face of this guy. Like, oh my
Wait,
God.
You're looking at a moon of a planet of this solar system
Yes.
in this lucid out of body experience dream.
Yeah.
And these beings accompany you and they take you to this planetary moon. Do you know which one? Which
I think
planet?
it was Iapetus.
Oh,
Yeah, the one.
which is one of the more distant moons of Saturn. And what makes Iapetus so bizarre is it's been noted since Cassini first found it that one side of it is incredibly bright and one side of it is incredibly dark.
Yep.
When Arthur Clarke did his prelude to 2001, in the novel, he placed the artifact from the ET civilization, the Stargate, on Iapetus, as opposed to in orbiting around Jupiter when he and Kubrick made the film, because Kubrick claimed that he didn't have the special effects technology to create a believable Saturn with the rings. But I've been wondering for decades whether that was merely more doublespeak because it was more this kind of distraction, that the real origin to the models of why are we here in the solar system, humanity, consciousness, 3D consciousness, really, as in Arthur's novel, lies at Saturn and not at Jupiter. But for the mainstream movie audience, Kubrick moved it to Jupiter to protect the bigger secret, which awaits real missions like the Titan mission going to Saturn, which Trump has now canceled.
Well, I read recently that they've now cataloged 274 moons around Saturn, and
Yeah, but they're most of them little rocks. When I say little, I mean a few 100 feet, whatever. I mean, when is a moon not a moon when it's rubble? Moons are only important if you can stand on them and not float away.
yes. So They take me around. This first moon, it's very startling. This is the second most profound experience I've had. The first being when in 1965 when I went out of body. That changed my life. So here I am. This is another. This is the next stage. It's
So
like,
you're an old hand at this, but this is a surprise?
yeah, this is so beyond anything. If they hadn't showed me this, I don't know if I could have put all this
Well,
together.
remember one of the watchwords of our research, and actually it's kind of becoming true with Stephen Sipes and his pyramid and his winery, which will be on tap tomorrow night with the experiments we did, the hyperdimensional experiments, is make no wine before it's time. And little did I know how true that was going to become. So maybe you were not shown this level of new material because A, you weren't ready,
Yes.
and B, the physics wasn't ready for it to become more than merely another storyline.
Yes, that's very insightful. That's correct. I would agree with you. They proceeded to take me around. I mean, we repeated that like 7 more planets they took me to, and each one, they're all unique sculptures. I just see these beautiful faces, effigies on the taking up the whole face of the planet.
Well, wait. I just had a weird thought. What if the planets that you were taken to, a la the work that David Sarita and I have been doing with Barbara, looking for the serious point, looking into the idea of a hyperdimensional solar system where half of the planets are visible in 3D and the other half, the other 9, are in a hyperdimension. What if you were taken not to the visible planets of this system, but the hyperdimensional complement of the total hyperdimensional solar system, meaning you were taken to one of the upper dimensional planets in another realm?
Yeah, quite possible. But I feel like I've identified the places they took me. For example, Mars. I didn't even recognize Mars. That's how, I mean, this model,
Well,
it requires,
wait, Jonathan. If you say you don't recognize it, but you do, I mean that's a contradiction.
yeah, because they're showing me this. I'm in my out of body state, my high energy, high frequency. You're a ghost, you're a spirit. So they're showing me this in my natural state of spirit. And you see things differently with your physical eyes than you do when you're a spirit. So they're showing me this. And when I came back to my body then, and over time, I'm learned to see this with my physical eyes. And so then I go, oh my gosh, that planet, now I can see Mars. I go, oh my gosh, look at that huge face on the side of the planet. That's the one that I was looking at when I was out of body. So that's how I'm now
Well,
putting,
here's another dumb question.
mhm.
What if they were taking you not into space or a higher dimension of space, but another dimension of time? In other words, you were seeing a Mars not as it is now, but as it was at some other time, perhaps in the past.
Or the future, that could be as well too, because
Well, how do you get order from chaos? In other words, unless we're positing this whole civilization sculpting Mars into a face in a future time, to me, it's more likely you're looking at it the way it was as opposed to the way it will be. In other words, back in time, because remember, we can only learn from the past. You can't learn from the future because the future is not written.
just the feeling I get is that these planets are created by these some higher beings, and it's like a womb. And when the planet's ready, a very large consciousness moves into the planet and becomes, it's like a woman having a baby. The soul goes into the
So
fetus.
this is the Gaia hypothesis on super steroids.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
And for those that wonder what I mean by Gaia, there was a scientist some years ago. I'm trying to remember his name. He was British. He basically came up with the idea that the planet is quasi conscious, meaning it has reactions, it has stimuli, it tries to optimize its environment for life that it creates on it that allows in terms of conditions to be more favorable for the creation. And he named it Gaia, which is, of course, the Greek for mother, for motherhood, mothership, mother essence. And you're saying that it's more than a kind of an extended metaphor, that when a planet reaches a certain stage, it becomes lovable and livable to a conscious being that moves in.
That's correct. Mother Nature is doing this. The Earth
Hmm.
is doing all this art. It's using erosion and wind and sand and electrical properties,
Now you
thermal
realize that
energy.
a lot of the audience just lost all their socks, because this is absolutely mind blowing as a real idea.
Oh my gosh, and it's so big. It is unbelievable. Like I said, if I hadn't been shown this art, I don't know if I would have put this together or not, but once you see it, wow. So we get back to Earth. So like I said, I'm thinking, wow, where are we that there's a sculpted planets? Like what solar system are where the heck are we? Not knowing that we're in the solar system. So we get back to Earth.
Yeah, but again, I want to drill down on this, because David has had access to data from a higher dimension, from his departed wife Crystal, who's given him very specific mathematical information about a whole other side of the solar system, a hyperdimensional set of planets that are not visible to terrestrial astronomy. And it checks out. So I'm just wondering if you were seeing counterparts of these hidden objects in 3D that are in a higher dimension, that we haven't seen any surface details. There's no data in what she has given him in terms of details. It's only in terms of their orbits, their years, their durations, where they would be in a complete solar system model. But we know no details of these proposed planets at all, except you're of a background and a talent and a capability to have physically traveled there in some form. And I'm just wondering if you could be mistaken, that what you were shown was in this 3D system as opposed to a higher dimensional counterpoint of 9 additional planets of the complete hyperdimensional solar system.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, but then the question is, how do we find out? Because I love finding out. That's what science is. You've got to find out. You got
I
to
can tell it was
test it
pretty
and prove it at some point by some mechanism.
it was very surprising to get back to my own planet and realize I didn't even recognize the Earth because I see these beautiful geoglyphs of these effigies, whoever these people are. I call them the great architects. And I'm looking at these faces go by, and the clouds are all part of the art and the atmosphere and the ground and everything. And we're just there in space looking at the Earth. I'm going, oh my God. So it was so profound. We're kind of skipping over it. This was extremely
Well, we don't have
spiritual,
to skip. We
profound.
got hours. Come on, don't skip. Don't
Well,
skip.
I could do a 2 hour documentary. So actually, I am going to animate this with 3D modeling in an upcoming documentary, just so people have an idea of what it looks like when I talk about this stuff and what I was seeing. So we get back to Earth, and like I said, I don't even recognize it, but it's sunk in that I am looking at all this stuff is sculpted.
Wait. When you say all this stuff, be specific. You mean the surface geology, mountains,
Yes.
cloud formations,
Yep.
geoglyphs? At
Yep.
some level, it's not a random erosion. It's an artwork on a scale unimaginable to
Yes.
people up to now, because no one's thought big enough.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a couple of months ago, I was watching a video. Somebody was at Grand Canyon, and it's a very big sky view looking over the Grand Canyon from the lookout point, and there are clouds coming over in the distance. It's miles away, and you can see this cloud bank crawling through the sky over the Grand Canyon, and then one of the clouds just poof, it dumps like an airplane putting out a fire. It just dumps a bunch of water and the water comes down. And oh my gosh, I never would have seen any of this stuff before. This is a new way of seeing. Now I see their faces and it's matching. There's all this matching going on, which I will get into later with my slides. It's all part of the art. The earth is thinking all of this and then it manifests all this. That's where the tragedy comes in because we dismiss all of this and the earth is doing all, it's a lot of work.
Well, the obvious explanation for this, if you're of a left brain kind of grounded, rational, metonymic person, is Jonathan is having the most extraordinary pareidolia experience or pareidolia imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you counter that? What is the evidence, the 3D evidence in favor of your model as opposed to their dismissal?
Well, I'm using false color imaging to just add some color to the planet's surface and clouds and so forth so that people can see it. And once it kicks in, it's a practice thing too. The more you look at it, the better you get. And now I'm over 2 years into this. That was January of 2023. So it's over 2 years now. And my vision just it continues to grow and actually evolve. And I talk about this evolution. I have a new documentary called Ancient Architects of Orion. I talk about how my site is evolving so that I can watch multiple trains of art morphing in concert.
Again, we got to ground this in evidence that others can follow. Because if you're the only one experiencing this, then it's nice for you, but what does it do for the rest of us?
And it's heartbreaking for me. I need to get other people to see this, so that's my mission. We have, about 4 minutes?
Well, to the bottom or the top of the hour,
Top of the hour, yeah. So in my item number 1, I have Keith's photo. Just to point out a few features of this, you have a sandstone plateau there with an arch on it. That is delicate arch.
On the left side of the middle of the picture, there's a mesa in the foreground, and then behind it is this other mesa with these various forms, geometric forms arrayed in roughly a line. And on the far left, you got this arch, which of course the mainstream says is erosion of sandstone by previous layers of strata over an immense period of time, millions of years, softer rock being eroded away by water, more resistant rock standing there, and you wound up with a natural arch looking something like what's in St. Louis, except it was formed by nature as opposed to by a conscious being.
Yes,
and
this is hyperdimensional art. So we're supposed to see, it's like Picasso and Cubism back in the early 1900s, where he was trying to transcend the canvas, a 2D canvas, and make it the illusion that there was depth to the painting on the canvas. He's trying to create that illusion. So it's similar here where the foreground where Keith took this picture, it's a lookout point, you have that. Then you have the kind of darker brown mesa on the left, and behind that you have the sandstone colored plateau with the arch and those little monuments on there. And then you have the sky. And we're supposed to look at this as one image.
Which has a meaning of what?
It's showing us who they are, and there's also history. Who they are, when they were, where they came from, how all this came to be.
What I'm seeing when I see this, if I go with your art model as opposed to just random erosion, the fact that this tableau, reading from left to right, starts with an arch. To me, an arch is a portal. It's a doorway. It's a connection between this reality and something else in your metaphor. And that's supposed to be the beginning of a journey of meaning that is not in 3D, but perchance at a higher dimensional level. Yes, no, maybe?
I present this.
Hold it there, because we're literally at the top of the hour. My guest this morning is Jonathan Womack, who was a documentary filmmaker. He is an experiencer in terms of out-of-body voyaging and journeying and questioning of higher dimensional realities. And he's come to a realization over the last 2 years, triggered by a set of photographs from our own Keith Morgan, that maybe that Earth is not the unconscious background of natural erosive forces that the rest of us have thought for a very, very, very long time. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. We shall return. And welcome back, everyone, on this Saturday night, April 12th, 2025. My guest this morning is out-of-body experiencer, documentarian, psi-researcher, a guy who kind of can walk in two worlds and keep a coherent train of thought. That's no mean feat. A lot of people, when they experience hyperdimensional realities, just look at the literature, look at the videos, look at YouTube, look at all of the books that have been written going back hundreds of years. It's a very destabilizing experience. And not everyone can do this with aplomb, or as my grandmother used to say, if you can keep your head when all around you they are losing theirs, then maybe you don't understand the situation. Okay, so Jonathan's model, which is actually prescinding from things that we're learning that I opened the show with. I mean, once you reach the threshold that there are, in fact, ancient extraterrestrial ruins with women leaving necklaces on the planet Mars, with incredible glass, incredibly reflective architecture arcing above the barren lunar landscape in the mainstream models that has now been photographed in ways that are impossible to ignore by the current, well, recently passed Blue Ghost mission. Once you get past the idea that Earth is the only embodiment for all time of consciousness in our reality, then why is it so hard to imagine that maybe consciousness itself is not limited to merely 3 dimensions? John, you're on.
All right, I'd like to go to my item number 2 and talk about some of the elements of this art, some of the techniques and what we're looking at. So the Earth makes these grooves, and you see these grooves all over the Earth in mountains, and it's in the sky, it's even in the Milky Way. These grooves depict facial features: eyes, nose, chin, mouth, part of the headdress. So the grooves are big, and there's also the little divots, and there's little bumps, moguls. All of this, the Earth is an artist, and it's making all this consciously. I've added some color to Keith's.
Let me ask you a detail, because I've been looking at this data, as you know, for at least a couple of years too.
Mhm.
And I've come to the conclusion that the planet itself is not conscious. That's where we part company. I'm willing to be convinced with additional evidence, but what I really kind of fastened on is if there are hyperdimensional beings who can reach through this barrier, this set of doorways between dimensions that keep us isolated in this bubble, this 3D bubble, an ascending hierarchy of beings more powerful, more time spanning than Earth consciousness is theoretically possible, and given an ascending level of capability on the part of beings that are not of a planetary scale, that are, quote, merely of a hyperdimensional scale, and are not limited to a century, but maybe 1,000, 10,000 years, if they're limited at all.
Yeah.
Then consciousness in terms of 3-dimensional physical reality as the ultimate expression of identity could choose to create art forms in their own image on a scale that's planetary as opposed to individual beings, and whose time scale for the creation would not be limited to 1,000 years or 10,000, but might even stretch into what we term geologic ages if they could only remove one mote of sand at a time, extending over geological periods of time in the way we measure time. In other words, do we have to leap to the idea of a planet as conscious as opposed to lesser beings that use planets as we would use canvas?
Yeah, certainly possible.
And then the big question, how will we tell the difference? Because I want to know. I don't want to speculate. I want to know.
Well, I'm definitely getting to the bottom of this. I didn't think I would make this much progress. I guess once you see them, I was telling my dentist about this when I was there. And oh, they had gotten back from, they went out to Utah, and it's their favorite vacation spot. I'm on the East Coast, so they went to Utah. So I was telling her about this, and she says, "You know, you see them, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I do. I see them." And she says, "It's very spiritual, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes, it is. It's very spiritual." Maybe that's why they chose me. I was listening and open to it, and it's become like a scene out of the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze
Hmm.
and Whoopi Goldberg. She plays Etta Mae, who has a seance business in New York City. So there's a scene where Patrick Swayze, he's a ghost, and he goes back to Etta Mae's place to ask her again for some help. And when he gets there, her seance room is shoulder to shoulder with people, and she's sitting at her little table there in the middle of the room with a client, a woman, the crystal balls on the table. And Patrick Swayze says, "Who are all these people?" And Etta Mae says, "Once one of them learned that I could hear them, they all started." She's like, "I can't even sleep. They're coming and they're lined up down the street." I can't. She's all discombobulated because now all these spirits want to talk through her. And
Because she was a point of three-dimensional contact.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
here's
So
another question I have. Um, when you say you're seeing faces in the rocks, this is going to sound crazy, folks. I have been seeing some of Jonathan's faces in interstellar nebula. Now, this is why this is interesting, because we know from experiments, we know from some of the research of Joseph Farrell, we know from my looking at lots of imagery of the hydrogen bomb tests, both at Inuitak and at other places in the South Pacific, and even the atomic bomb tests of fission devices in the American Southwest
ouch.
in Nevada, that you can see faces in the plasma of these nuclear explosions. Now, why is that important? Because the Russians, beginning with Kozyrev and then continuing on to more contemporary scientists, have discovered that plasmas are the ideal intermediary between three-dimensional forces and hyperdimensional forces in the torsion field.
Hmm.
So if there is hyperdimensional consciousness, and we got some pretty good data that there is, then it would use as a medium to probe into our three-dimensional reality a mechanism, the plasma, which is ionized ions and gases and protons and electrons and free electrons. It would use that as a medium to transport consciousness between dimensions. And then what form would that consciousness have? Is it outrageous to imagine that consciousness itself is kind of visible as a facial form, as an identity in terms of facial structure, that is the quote face of individual consciousness regardless of the medium and regardless of the dimension, which means if consciousness is able to use plasmas in 3 dimensions as a way of manifesting their presence,
Mm-hmm.
why is there a limitation of scale? In other words, if they can resculpt plasma in an atomic explosion briefly, for instance, why could that same consciousness not resculpt plasmas in interstellar space between the stars, given a much longer 3D time frame? And why, given that every material object at some level is a plasma, there's never 100% non-plasma present even in rocks, there's always a bit of charge left over.
Yes.
Why could this consciousness not, given geological timescales, literally sculpt its identity into the so-called immovable rocks of planetary surfaces themselves? In other words, once you open the door, Jonathan, to this idea, there's almost no limit to how far it can be extended pending confirmation of a model that can be tested.
Yes. These grooves I've been speaking of, I see them in the Milky Way as it goes by at night. They're everywhere. At one point, I realized that a lot of these are match lines. You can match the lines of a particular mountain with something behind it, and bingo, it makes another face. Yeah, I have some.
You mean in terms of an alignment, a geometric alignment?
Yes, you have this flat ground, and then you have these sandstone structures sticking up out of the ground. And what I found was that when you angle the Google Earth camera, let's say you tilt it up and down, you'll have a rock mound in the foreground, something in the midground, the background, and then you have the sky. They align and they make a vase. And I actually have a video. That's my item number
So
3.
this is your geometric evidence of conscious design
Mhm.
as opposed to random erosion.
Oh, God, yeah, this is not random. This is the
Well,
thought
well,
it
yeah,
takes.
so from
Holy cow.
the evidence is that until you line things up properly, it looks random.
Yeah,
But if you're at the right angle, the right elevation, the right field of view, what looks random suddenly looks like a piece of art like Picasso had generated.
exactly. That's right. This is
So,
psychoactive.
let's go back to methodology. That is one of your tests because not everything on the landscape can do this.
Yes.
Only certain features can do this, right?
Right. Yeah. If you're out in the plains of Indiana, you're not going to see these alignments that you would see in Monument Valley or the Southwest.
Which is a strong argument that you're looking at non-random conscious art as opposed to just pareidolia.
Yeah. Some areas of the world are more art gallery than other areas, but
You
it's
mean
all part of.
you mean the material is more friendly to rearrangement
Mm-hmm.
by a conscious erosion. Now here's another question. It's assumed when we're looking at this picture, that mesa top with the arch on the left and the other very geometric structures, they're all different.
Mm-hmm.
They're geometric, but they're all different.
Yeah.
It's assumed that there used to be a level of the earth equivalent to the tops of those monuments, those structures,
Yes.
and it
Mm-hmm.
was eroded down by selective rain, long-term, millions of years
Yep.
erosion of the rocky matrix, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if instead of being eroded down, the artists, we're presuming now the hyperdimensional artists, grain by grain and sand element by sand element, built up these objects from the plane, from the mesa, as 3-dimensional art forms in creation as opposed to selective destruction?
Sure. Either one could
And
be as
how would
possible.
we test that?
That I don't know. I'm just trying to get people to see the art. And let's go to my item number 2, just so I can go through these 3 images here. I've added color to Keith's photo. The top image, I want people to see that the sky is the top half of the face. One technique that architects use is they use, I don't know what to call it, fractured faces. So you take part of the face, like the chin, maybe you have the nose, but much of the face is missing. And the reason they do that is because they fill in the missing parts of the face with background features like the sky, the
When you
delicate
say the
arch like
sky, you mean clouds in the sky.
clouds, or at night, it's all the stars. The documentary I'm working on now, Ancient Rings of Sirius, there's a scene in there where we're at Delicate Arch here from this very view, actually. Those features you just mentioned there to the right of the Delicate Arch, they look like they might be pyramids or some kind of mon or
Well,
something like that.
there are 3 small pyramids just to the right of the arch.
Yeah.
Then there's a bigger feature that looks much more planar, like it's the
Mm,
base of a pyramid that's
mm,
top has been whacked off.
yes.
Then the third object, which is basically in shadow, is a spire on the left of it, and then a kind of a solid mass on the right. The next object appears to be a smaller pyramid and a much larger pyramid, and then a skinny pyramid in between. And then on the far right, it looks almost like a Giza copy.
Yeah, and what I found was you and I were talking about this was 3 years ago when I was on your show, Queen Hera of Park Avenue. I had found these 4 holes, these 4 arches in this wall of rock. It's like a partition. It's one side of Park Avenue. Park Avenue is named such because you're walking this path between 2 towering stone formations on each side of you, and it's like New York City. So on the
In other
right,
words, you're walking down an avenue with skyscrapers on the left and skyscrapers on the right.
yeah, so on the right, I'm looking at this partition, and I found these 4 arches I was looking for, these holes that a person could stand within any, these 4 arches in this wall. And one thing I said to you, picked up on a lot of this more than anyone else. You said, "Yeah, it kind of looks like there's some features on the wall." And I said, yes. And in fact,
And when I said features, I meant facial features.
I think you meant facial features. And I was trying to find the word for matching at that point because I didn't know how to quantify it. When I was looking at this wall, when you back up and you look at the wall and across the way, across Park Avenue at this cliff mural that's 700 feet tall, they're matching to make a face. It just seemed impossible at the time. I didn't know what to call it. And then you said matching, and that's as good a word as any. So yes, now I see the matching. It's just very easy and obvious. And anyway, the top image in item 2, I'm hoping to show people that there's this face. I know this person well. The top half of the face is made by the sky. You have the eyes and the nose, which I added some little light blue color, and then some teal color above that to show his.
This is between the mesa in the front of us and
Yep.
the delicate arch.
It's right above the delicate arch, a blue area of the clouds. It's blue and white. You have his eyes and his nose. It's looking to the left a little bit. And the teal colored area above that in the clouds is his helmet or headdress or crown or whatever. And then the bottom of his face is the delicate arch plateau, that sandstone with the arch and those other features. So we're supposed to see the Earth is making this cloud art, and it comes by and it matches.
All right, Jonathan, I hate to say, but I'm not seeing what you're describing.
Oh, okay. Well, all right.
What
And
I
then,
see, if you look at the foreground mesa, which you have tinted on the far right edge of it deep red, right? Then you have the background mesa with delicate arch.
yes. Yeah.
All right. Between the foreground mesa and the delicate arch, I see a reclined, very primitive looking being with a very prominent nose very prominent eye ridges, which are dark bluish. The scalp area would be lightish, lighter white, grading into a blue-green. And then the chin area is just above and between delicate arch and the foreground mesa on the left. To the right of that, I see two more figures, which appear to be disconnected and not part of any facial structure. In other words, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but I'm seeing something suggestive of a kind of a reclining face looking straight up into space, kind of like the face on Mars, but from the chin, looking toward the top of the face at a very steep angle with a very prominent nose casting a shadow from the sun to the left, with the shadow to the right, and then these two other features, one reddish, which you have darkened and made reddish, and then a whitish cloud formation slightly above and further to the right. I'm not seeing the much larger face you're describing.
Okay. And I can always
Well,
paint
but
that and
let's
say,
not pass over this.
well, it's psychoactive and we're all different. It taps into your
See, that's where I'm
mind.
going. Is it
Yeah.
because there is no single objective
No, there's
face
a
to?
million. It's a
Well, see,
sea of,
this is why
yeah,
I'm bringing this out.
it's a
That
sea of
my
faces.
resonance with this set of structures
Yes.
is different from
Yes.
your resonance
Yes.
because we're different conscious entities.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that I can't point out what I'm seeing and you, oh, hey, that's cool. Look, I see this, and you can describe to me, and I can say, oh, okay, I see it. So it's like that. There's a sea of faces.
See,
This is an
for
ocean of
skeptics,
art.
they're going
Yeah.
to say, well, this theory has got more holes in it than a piece of Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
But yes and no, because the fact that I'm looking at this and I'm seeing another facial representation of an entity when I should be just seeing randomness, clouds in the sky. Because I never was very good at looking up at clouds and seeing bunnies or whatever. Other people would lie on their back and look up, and I would just see clouds. And I have a very left rational metonymic mind. So if I'm seeing something, either you're incredibly persuasive in terms of your ability to get me to see something that isn't there, or you're able to guide me to a location where my resonance is different than yours because what I'm seeing is overlaid with what you're seeing, but the place itself is the critical pivot point of seeing anything.
We were talking about, again, 3 years ago during that Queen Hera of Park Avenue show. There's a rock in the Park Avenue area. It looks like a director putting his finger and thumbs together to frame a shot. It's called sheetrock.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned since is indeed much of these rocks and spires, that's exactly what they're doing. They're framing a shot for you. So in the documentary I'm working on now, I have this scene where we're looking at this delicate arch like we are here, and the Orion constellation is rising up in the morning, comes up just over the ridge, and these pyramid-like formations on this ridge, and it comes up right in between two of them. And it's framing, because when we look at the night sky comparatively, it's like we're looking at the inside of a 2D dome. We're not seeing all of the sky and the color and the nebula and the light. It's like the light is turned off. And
well, it depends. Here in New Mexico, it's vivid, it's colorful.
yes.
There's no atmospheric pollution to speak of. There's no
Yep.
sky lighting. Well, there didn't used to be. I'm north of Albuquerque, so Albuquerque is now really, intruding on the southern sky. But when I moved here, which was decades ago, it was really a pristine sky that I've only seen in the middle of the ocean. You can still see a pristine sky if you're on a cruise ship or on an ocean liner looking up at night. That's probably the last place on Earth, unless you're in the middle of like South America or in a desert or whatever, where you see pristine skies. But the idea that surface objects would be arranged to mirror relationships to constellations rising over them at
Hmm.
certain times,
Yes.
again, you got to expand your mind to consider that the limited 3D experience we have is only a tiny fraction of a much larger reality that our limited human condition cannot possibly experience, let alone maybe even comprehend.
And all these V-shaped slots and all these spaces between two formations, they want us to look right here. Block out all of this out here. Just look at this spot here, right under Orion's belt, which is the Orion Nebula. And it highlights the nebula, and you see it differently because they are framing it in this way. And I'm
All
add
right,
some
we're at
color.
the bottom of the hour. When we come back, I want you to talk about meaning. Because every artist I've ever known, including Cynthia and Georgia and a few others, their art has a meaning. There's a reason. There's something they're trying to imprint in what they have created to communicate beyond the physical form an idea, a meme, a reality. So let's when we come back, let's talk about the potential message in the rocks and in the clouds and in the beings. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. The reason I'm doing time thingies tonight, I think, given a major clue that the president gave us many, many months ago, his hyperdimensional watch line, that we're on some kind of countdown to something bigger on the scale maybe of what Jonathan and I are talking about, and that others know we're on a countdown. You're on the other side of midnight. My name is Richard C. Hoagland. We shall return. And welcome back, everyone, on this Saturday night here on the other side of midnight. I mean, I know we're talking about something which is really, 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 really hard to get your mind around. Because it's so easy to say, oh, Jonathan's seeing things, I'm seeing things, other people are seeing things. What we're looking for is points of correspondence to where we're all seeing the same thing without being told what to see. And some of it is easy, some of it is very hard, but the concept itself, once you realize that there are structures on other nearby planets that the mainstream has been lying to us about for centuries, open your mind a bit. Is it not possible that in a hyperdimensional universe, more things in heaven and earth ratio are possible than are dreamed of in your philosophy? Far more interesting and important things. Far more. Okay, Jonathan, we are back. Where do we go next? Jonathan, unmuting helps.
Oh, oh, that's what that button's for.
Yes, yes. Very, very, very metonymic. Very, very.
Yeah, so number three, I made a video. Again, we're looking at a sea of faces, infinite faces. You can never count them all, but it's a sea of faces in an ocean of art. And I'm just highlighting a few of these faces and how this matching and aligning works. We're looking at Delicate Arch again. Keith's photo is looking north. Now we're looking south, and
And,
this stick
and we're looking at number 3, matching example.
is number 3, and I've highlighted arrows are pointing to the matching point, and there's an area that I drew a green line around this feature. It's like a slab of rock sticking up. It's a thin slab. We're looking at one side of this slab of rock sticking up in this pit area of delicate arch. If you watch the video, I think it's self-explanatory because you can see as I move the camera, I pan to the right, the faces change. And I don't know how you could explain this any other way other than conscious art of a scale that you can't wrap your mind around, but here it is, and I'm trying to show this. So,
Okay, well, before the break, I said we were going to get into why, the meaning.
mhm.
What would the artist or artists, because I'm in favor of the multiple art model, higher consciousness, but not at a planetary scale. I mean,
Yes, there's, yeah,
I'm not excluding the idea of the Gaia idea, but I'm seeing other evidence that we're dealing with, and I don't even want to use the term lesser beings, but shall we say less sophisticated efforts by formative consciousness that's not on a planetary scale. And I see this, and my major question is why? And my answer is because the first and foremost rule of all consciousness, regardless of scale, and again, this is my idea, having nothing to do with Jonathan's work, is consciousness exists to exert its influence and its presence on the larger world. In other words, it is because it is. I am that I am. Its face, its facial representations, is an enunciation of its very existence in reality at whatever level you want to think of. And that brings us to what do you impugn to be the meaning behind this art?
there's several sides to that question. One is it's disclosure. It's these are them. These are the great architects who created this galaxy, and I'm making these monuments. I'm speaking for the Earth now. Making these monuments to them because they created the Earth, my body. It's not only to honor the great architects, it's to show humans as well that, hey, here we are. This is them. They are real. You're not imagining this, and you're not alone. It's disclosure in its purest form.
Disclosure, that's an interesting term. So you're saying the art has always been there,
Yes.
but our perception is coming up to where we can realize it's there. Now, is this just in our era? Or if we look at the cyclic model, where the precession drives the physics and the consciousness of humans on Earth in cyclic patterns over and over and over again. So you have very high conscious beings, and then, like in the Kali Yuga where we are now, you've got really dumb and stupid people, and they're about to ascend to the next level in 3D because of the change of the Yuga cycle, probably in 2025, according to certain calendars, that these are timeless lessons that are being presented to us again and again. So we get smart enough to reconnect with our real heritage and lineage and creativity and creation, the lessons will be there for us to understand.
3 weeks after I did the show with you in June of 2023, it was August 8th.
You're really blaming me for a lot here, John. You're pinning this all on me.
It's like 3 weeks after that, I'm here at my desk and I'm looking at Delicate Arch, and now I see these people and getting familiar with them and so forth. And then I get the tap on the shoulder and it says, stop what you're doing, go look at Giza and Stonehenge. And my thought was, why would you have me go look at something Giza's? Some people built, and they put some rocks in there, and they did that. It was a few thousand years ago. I'm looking at Delicate Arch. It's 150 million years old. The faces are so beautiful, and you got the arch. It's a cosmic viewmaster. And I'm like, why would you want me to go to these pedestrian constructions that some people made a few thousand years ago? I don't understand, but I will go there. I'll stop what I'm doing. So I go look at.
Well, wait. That's really very similar to Barbara Honegger's moment when she's doing some kind of mundane paperwork, related to the Reagan presidency in the White House as a staffer. And suddenly she's sitting at her desk and she gets this download. The pyramids on the Giza Plateau are mirrored reflections of the belt stars of Orion. And there's another part that needs to be thought about, which is the Sirius point, in addition to the three stars in the belt, and where that could be physically in Egypt. And it begins her on a decades-long quest, a download that intrudes on her mundane, normal 3D workaday in terrestrial politics. So you said basically the same thing happened to you. Something metaphorically taps you on the shoulder and says, John, kind of put aside what you're doing. You need to think about these two other places.
Yes, and I was
Wow.
surprised. And I get these downloads all the time, and it's getting to the point where I'm forgetting things they show me, and it's beautiful, incredible, and you can't believe it, but there it is. So anyway, it was August 8th, which I learned afterwards is Infinity Day, because when you put the number 8 on its side, it's the symbol for infinity. There's this Lion's Gate constellation in the sky where this energy is coming through on August 8th and all this stuff. I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, I get the tap, so I go look at the Sphinx, and the first thing I see is my friends at Delicate Arch are, the Sphinx is not a Sphinx. Go to my slide 4, this face that I highlight in purple color, that's my buddy from Delicate Arch, and he's wearing the crown there, and the crown there's 1,000 faces there. We're looking at thousands of faces here at the Sphinx. They change as the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars are across the sky. It's always changing. There's all this shadow art, and it's just so incredible. So that's the first thing I see is that this isn't a Sphinx. There's no lion. This has nothing to do with a lion. And I also see that it has been defaced by people to make this look more like a lion's body. They have destroyed irreplaceable art. I put some color on this so you can see it's not a lion. This is a purple face there and the arms, and it's wearing this crown. And then the bottom half of item 4, I can see that the Sphinx is in this pit area, which fits the model. You have the pit at Delicate Arch, so that when you look through the arch, that pit wall or cliff wall in the background matches with the arch to make faces of these people. So in this black and white image, you have the sky, then you have the mountains, and then the sand where those camels are, and then you have this kind of pit wall, and in the foreground,
Well,
the Sphinx.
it's technically called the Sphinx enclosure.
Okay. So there was all this matching going on, because remember, part of the canvas, the ground is part of the canvas. We look at these features like in Monument Valley that stick up out of the ground. The face can be the ground, and the thing sticking up is the crown of this face. And you have the same thing here in Giza, where it's all about slope. When you have this slope, it allows the faces on the sloping sand, and then the pyramids are the crown of that face. So I'm looking at this going, now I see why they wanted me to come here and look at the Sphinx, because, as I said, the grooves are all features, and the Sphinx has all these horizontal grooves. Most of the art on planet Earth is horizontal groove based, but you have other places like Devil's Tower in Wyoming or all of Iceland where the art is vertical lines. If you go look at Devil's Tower, you see it's all these vertical grooves. But it's the same thing. It's all faces and they're beautiful effigies and very profound and incredible and all that.
Okay, now this is important. I'm looking at your top part of number 4, where you have the traditional Sphinx face, Kephren, maybe, headdress, maybe, with the body behind it. but you've got the area below that face limned out here in purple.
Yeah,
And to
that's my.
me, it's looking to the bottom left. There's a predominant protuberance, which looks like a nose.
Yeah.
The two eyes are like slits,
Yes.
horizontal, left and right.
Grooves, slits. Yes.
Well, they look grooves to me are more like
Same
slits.
idea, though. Yeah.
Well, slits are more defined. They're more language. Remember, I'm a wordsmith. I like precision in language. So yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Hmm.
The problem is that the skeptic's going to say, "Oh, come on, guys, you're just projecting on the body of the chest of the lion and the what used to be the root, the base of the false beard, which broke off and was found lying in the sand between the paws when the sand was excavated, and you're just projecting like crazy on the erosion of the strata of the yardang that originally was used to build the template for the Sphinx that we see in sculpting on it and around it."
No, the slits allow for having 1,000 overlapping faces. All the slits are features. They're eyes.
Well, you say that, but
Yeah.
how do you prove it? What's
Well,
your
one
testable
example
evidence?
I use is Picasso, where his self-portrait, which I have in an upcoming slide, he's trying to show himself in a greater context. He has two of his faces combined where they share an eye. So there's three eyes and two faces.
Okay,
And
so if we're looking at this middle part of the Sphinx's chest as another facial, almost like an abstract representation, schematic, how do you put the two arms into that context? What role
that
do they play?
that to me would be bowing or on your knees or praying or that kind of thing. This it's
So they're
the
really arms schematically out in front of this face.
yes.
So we're
Mm,
looking at a consciousness in obeisance to something.
yes. And in the bottom of that, where the black and white photo with the camels there, I mean, if you look at this side view of the Sphinx, you can see that the so-called body, look, that's a side profile. Be able to see at least one face there with the eyes and the nose and the lips. And you get to recognize, especially the lips of the Sphinx, because those lips are,
See, what you might need to do is to do an abstract enlargement, like I have Andrew do from time to time, where you put a piece of artwork in the sky in the upper right, and you literally limb out what we're supposed to be comparing
yeah,
this
I've
to for
done a
those.
million of those. Yes.
Yeah, but that's
Uh,
very important because remember the
it
Boeing
is.
study I talk about a lot. Like, for
Yeah.
instance,
I,
in that side view, if I'm looking at this black and white side view on the left with the
mhm,
traditional head of the Sphinx at the top
yeah.
and his chest, and then the arms extending out at the very bottom, about 2/3 of the way down.
Hmm.
If I look at the background strata on the other side of the enclosure, I am seeing what appears to be another face with two eyes looking directly past the chest of the Sphinx at me,
Yeah.
dark.
I see that too. There's all
Again,
this matching.
how do
Yeah.
we know that's not just incredible subjectivity?
You
And it's
will in
not,
time. Yeah.
no, no, you can't, no, you cannot take that doorway out of this conundrum.
Well,
You
this
have,
is a spiritual thing,
you
really.
have,
So if
yeah,
people aren't ready, they're not going to see it. If they see
oh,
it,
no, no, no,
then,
wait.
you know,
When you say spiritual, what you mean is the student has to be appropriately in tune to
yeah,
be in resonance with this,
that's correct.
which means it's something that cannot be taught. It has to be apprehended at a deeper level when the student is ready in terms of resonance. So, Jonathan, why are we doing this program?
Because you can have people that do see it that can help people that don't see it, that are ready, and they just need a little help. They just need, like me,
You
I
mean they
find,
need to be kicked off the cliff?
yeah, those three spirit beings that showed me the faces, I was ready, but I
Well, you
wouldn't
look
have
at
seen
the
it.
show as a trigger, so people that may have never in a million years imagined this as a possibility, if they listen and follow us tonight, they will be brought to the edge of the cliff and may step over and see what you are seeing.
If we go to item number
But
5,
let's not leave this lower
I'm
part of the
not. I'm trying to move on so we can get through.
hang on,
I can
hang
show you
on,
some of this
hang
stuff.
on.
We're
Because
never going to get through this.
what I'm now, we were not going to reach the end of all your images. No way. But it's important that we drill down because in the drilling down, we may get insight that we don't. Like now, I'm still looking at the bottom half of number 4. And in the strata above that first face, I see a much bigger face
Hmm.
with a very broad nose, 2 eyes left and right, a plainer top that looks very stylized, but I'm seeing eyebrow ridges on both sides of this broad nose. And
Hmm.
the nose is literally atop the smaller face that I saw
Yeah,
moments before.
I see that too. Yeah, it is a scaled thing. It goes all the way out to looking at the earth from a distance. I think it's
Well,
part
then,
of how
well, then
you
what you're
read.
saying is the artwork is fractal,
It's fractal.
meaning that it ascends in scales.
Oh,
All right. Well, remember,
wow.
we're not with you yet. We're trying to see how you got to where you are.
Yeah, a fractal ocean. So if we go to number 5, I've got some images here where I added a little bit of color. The top one of the Sphinx. I've added some pink color to the face of this person who's featured prominently at Delicate Arch and lots of other places. And because those lips are you get to recognize those lips when you see them somewhere in Switzerland, in the Alps or whatever. You will see these lips, and you just get used to these people's faces after a while. I add a little gold color to show the crown, and there's just thousands of faces here with all the grooves and the slits and the slots and the little bumps and divots. Everything is part of the art. Same with the pyramids. Again, on number 5, I'm showing in the middle area, I have a comparison here to Delicate Arch, where you're looking through the arch and the background cliff and the sky. You should see limitless faces, just so
See,
many.
I think you're not making enough of the idea that you have to look through the arch to see the context. Because again, in a 3D metaphor, the arch to me is a portal, a doorway, a transition between literal dimensions. Otherwise, why make it an arch?
The reason they made it an arch, let's say you have a bust of Ludwig von Beethoven. He's looking at you front profile. So what they do, just like Picasso wanted to make a picture in a greater context, to show a woman or himself in a greater context, that's what these people are doing to an unimaginable scale. They have a bust and they divide it into 3 sections: the left side, the right side, and the middle section. They take away the left and right third of the face. You're left with the middle of the face. If you're facing Delicate Arch here, edge on, you're looking at a face that the sides have been removed, and you're looking at the center of it. It's part of the forehead. It comes down. You have the nose. You have a little bit of the eyes and the nose, and a little bit of the jaw. You have the mouth. You have the chin. So it's this slice of a person's face. And the reason they do that is they fill in the missing parts with the background mounds and sandstone and the sky and all that. And then the same thing.
Jonathan, you
Yeah.
realize this is a very, very, very hard sell.
Yeah, but that's why I want people to watch my documentary, because I spend a great deal of time showing this, animating this with the Google Earth camera and adding color so you see it. You see what I'm talking about, and it's hard to argue that
Okay, then
this
at this
could be.
point in the show, we should talk about your documentary. Where can people find it? How do they click on it? How do they, get to see it, etc.?
Okay, yeah. I saved that for the last slide. You can just go to my last slide and click on it. It takes you to the Paraflix platform. There's a couple of trailers there you can watch, and then you can sign up for a 3-day trial, free trial, and watch that. And all of my shows are on there. And they have it exclusively for a while, and then it'll go to Apple TV and all these other places. So I highly recommend that, watching that, because I spend a lot of time orbiting delicate arch and adding color, and you can see that as you're orbiting, faces are all matching with the background cliffs and mounds and the sky, and it's incredible. It's hard to believe, but the evidence is very compelling in the documentary.
Well, I presume familiarity also helps, meaning the more you look,
Yeah.
the more you train your eye and brain how to look,
Yeah.
the more you just kind of open your mind to the possibilities. You don't get hung up on, oh, this is crazy. There's no way.
Yeah.
If you put that aside and say in an infinite universe, an infinite number of things could be possible, then in other words, a large part of this is pre-filtering and saying, oh, come on, that's nuts.
You have to accept it first. Yeah. Or just believe it's possible. Just
you have to accept the idea.
The idea, yeah.
That it's possible.
If you don't accept it, you're not going to see it. But if you say, all right, just for giggles, I'm going to say, Jonathan's right, and then you should see it. I used my paper route as a boy as an example, where a morning paper route, dark in the morning, I'm riding my bike around delivering papers. I used to practice trains of thought. I'd see how many trains of thought I could have. It's pretty boring on a paper route. So I try to think how many trains of thought.
Unless you're doing a paper route in downtown Manhattan, in which case you have to keep your wits about your God.
We're at the top of the hour.
Yes, very good. My guest this morning, Jonathan Womack, who's trying to get everyone to think the impossible, that planets, either because of planetary consciousness or beings that are somewhat lesser, but certainly incredibly more powerful in moving matter insubstantially than we are, have chosen planetary surfaces to create at multiple levels of scale representations of art, of consciousness, of awareness, of meaning. And what's that meaning? Well, that can be argued, as we shall do when we return on the other side of midnight for this Saturday night, grading now almost into Sunday morning here in the Land of Enchantment. Stay tuned. And welcome back, everyone, on this Sunday morning, Saturday evening, Sunday morning here in the Land of Enchantment. I know this is a big thing to swallow. I mean, come on. When I thought about doing this, I thought to myself, okay, at least half the audience is going to show, okay, Hoagland's lost it. He's seeing things where there's nothing to see. It's pareidolia. It's just craziness. So, because I like being on the cutting edge, I'm going to tell you a bit more craziness. Now, you may choose to believe it. You may choose not to. And it's so interesting that Jonathan mentioned that movie earlier in the show, Ghost, which basically is about two people who are so in love and one of them is taken away before his time and is trying every way possible from the higher dimension to let her who's been left behind know A, they still exist, and B, there's something important that they must communicate between dimensions. When Robin died, of course, it was devastating, and it's been 6 years, and it doesn't seem like six, but it's been six chronological circuits of the Earth around the sun. And I keep waking up every morning wondering where she is, what she's doing. And I say that very advisedly because I've had evidence going back now 6 years with witnesses, people that know me, have known me for a long time, that I'm not making stuff up. But that would be anathema to my very being to make stuff up, particularly about Robin. When Robin died 6 years ago, I began to notice something very weird. In the bathroom, behind the door, there was a full length mirror that she would use before she would go out or I would go out or we would both go out to basically see what she looked like from head to toe. And that mirror, because I don't use it, just sat behind that door. And every time I would open, because of the door stop, it would sit there, but it wouldn't be touched by opening the door to the bathroom or closing it. And then one day, I looked at the mirror in the right light from the lights above the sink and the vanity and all that. And because the lighting was coming at the right angle, I saw there were images on the mirror, the full length mirror behind the door. And those images were written literally in the dust of the mirror. And as the months went on, and then the years, the images on that mirror took on more and more and more of a solid form. And I've been very careful not to touch that mirror to protect it because what I want to do is take photographs of it in the right lighting with the right contrast and shading and enhancements and all that. But some force, something organized the dust falling on the mirror to create visible, recognizable forms that can be recorded on any camera. And I've been waiting for the appropriate time to make those photographs more known. To me, just to me, I can't convince anybody. The artist was Robin, maneuvering somehow between dimensions, the dust particles falling on that mirror to create those forms as a meaning, as a message from her to me between dimensions. That's when I began looking at nuclear explosions, interstellar nebula, the rocks in Utah, other art forms, geoglyphs on other planets, and seeing vast and tiny representations of those same potential forms. So I know that Jonathan is onto something, but I can't democratize it because even when I publish these photos, and I will, there will be skeptics that say, oh, come on, Hoagland, you did it yourself. Because I'm not going to do this to convince anybody, just those with open minds that there is more in our heaven and earth than is dreamed of in current contemporary philosophy. Possibilities once more. Okay, John, where do you want to pick up?
Let's pick up on slide number 6.
Okay,
Item number 6.
number
Just
6.
showing here that this ridge, the corner of the pyramids, that's all their faces. And it's a technique like the slits and the grooves. The ridge is a technique they use to make faces. And the light comes in on one side. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And on Iapetus, it's the same thing with ridges all over the solar system. It's such a beautiful technique they use. And here we see it on the pyramids. When they tapped me on the shoulder and said, go look in the Sphinx, the one thing that struck me too was that this is not, some people came here with knowledge of fractal physics and art.
Well, wait. We got a
They were
whole
trying
planet
to help
next
us
door.
to see this,
We
you
got a whole
know?
planet next door called Mars, where we can see this everywhere.
Yeah,
Starting with the face on Mars, Cynthia and I have been talking for years that the face on Mars is not just a lion and a
oh,
hominid.
God,
It's
no.
got it's got all kinds of other forms. You turn it
Yeah.
upside down, you see other forms.
Hmm.
The Martian art appeared to be almost this automatic, multi-dimensional perspective as a way in 3D of the Martian civilizations, plural, to remind themselves that three-dimensional reality was not the only reality there is.
Absolutely.
And then the Mayans, by the work of George Haas, who, by the way, has just published another book about this multiple planet imagery that we're going to talk about in the next few weeks because he's just got this book published. So we're going to talk about it. You can find out where to get it. He found for me when I had come to him with this extraordinary problem that I laid out at the UN decades ago, the Sphinx being the Sphinx on Mars, the face on Mars being a hominid and a feline representation. He said, but wait a minute, that's all over Mesoamerica. That's Mayan art. So we seem to have a transposition of an art form from literally a more ancient artistic culture, because Mars is not the planet of war, it's the planet of art, to Earth at some point in the past. And we're getting close to where we can date that. And now what you're saying is this art form is infinitely older in terms of geological time
Yes.
and is basically a communication between dimensions to think bigger,
Yes.
much bigger than our
Yes.
current limited, tiny, three-dimensional organic form.
I think of Horton, the elephant with the little sunflower in his trunk. We are here. We are here. It's like that. The art is like, we are
What
here. This is
years
us.
of who?
Horton, here's a who. Yes. In my item number 6, the bottom half of it, I mean, this is what I see when I look at the pyramids. And as you orbit the pyramids, all the face combinations change. This is HD art. You have different depths,
But
different
again,
spatial.
unless you're ready to accept the possibility, you're
Mhm.
going to think that Jonathan and Hoagland are absolute wackos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get a lot of that. I sent out about 32 review requests for my documentary, and I think there were 5 people that answered in the positive, and the rest either ignored me or sent me some smarmy comment about I'm a I'm
Well, that's not
loony.
bad.
Yes.
That's much higher than I would have thought, given some of my emails. Remember, they're still claiming that there's nothing on the moon or on Mars. And that's just
Yes.
3D, solid, kick the tires kind of stuff.
It's so tragic that people will dismiss all this. So let's go to number 7 because I love this slide. There's 1,000 faces embedded on the pyramids, and depending on the time of day and the night and all this, the faces shift and change. And so I just added some ultraviolet color. Hopefully, you can see if you just focus on the middle pyramid, the Khufu, you should see the face of Lord of the Rings looking dude wearing a pyramid hat, and then all the other faces overlapping, and then faces that are the top part of the face is in the sky, the eyes, and the bottom part of the face, like the mouth and the chin and everything, is the pyramids and the ground, and it's all forming. We're supposed to see in this way, and we don't. and we
Well, all right,
won't.
we got about 45 minutes left.
Okay.
Let's talk about why. Why, if we're such dumb, stupid students, if one out of 20 people can see something like this
Hmm.
and not think they're totally wacko themselves, what's the point? Why would artists on any scale you imagine keep doing this over and over and over again if the audience is too damn dumb to apprehend what they're seeing?
Because at some point they will see it. That's the hope. That this is done out
And
of
then
love.
what? And after they see it, then what is supposed to happen? Because art,
It evolves us.
in my primitive apprehension of this, is art's supposed to move us to do something, to
It
be
e-
something different, to reach out and somehow change the world, and not just to look at it and say, oh, that's cool, that's cool.
it's an evolutionary tool. It really does evolve us, and I go into this in the documentary.
Yeah, but wait, you're saying you have to evolve to see it. It didn't prompt you to see it. You had to be ready to see it. So how does that feedback into changing you as a person if you already have to be changed? Aha, gotcha. Come on.
I don't know. Whatever is all I
No,
can
no,
say to
you
that,
can't. No, no,
Richard.
no, no, no,
I
no,
don't
no. You
know.
can't. No, no, no. Unless
This is done to evolve us.
unless
When
this
we
art
see
can
this, this is
Jonathan,
a tool for evolving
Jonathan,
us.
shh, unless this art can reach out and change a skeptic into a more open person, what's the damn point?
I guess there is no point to any of it. There's no point to nothing. Nothing matters. It's all bullshit. Is that what you want me to say, Richard?
No, I want you to give me a reason
Jesus.
why
I'm trying to
only
tell you.
people. Yeah,
This
but
is
you're
to
saying that
evolve
only.
the people on the planet. It's
Yeah,
an
but you're not
evolutionary
evolving people.
time.
People have to evolve to see it. That's what you've been saying all night.
Yes, and then that's the next step. And then they see it, and then we evolve to the next stage.
Which is
We're
what?
ready.
How has this evolved you?
It's expanding my mind
To what end?
to the next level of human involvement, whatever that is.
Okay, well, I can give a more concrete answer because remember, I've been following without talking to you. We have not shared notes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been following a very interesting parallel path. And the idea that Robin is able to control dust motes over time and create images on a mirror in a 3D bathroom, to me, is extraordinarily important because A, she's doing something to send a message. B, she exists in some other dimension to be able to do something to send a message. C, she's not the only one because that would be absolutely absurd to imagine out of all the consciousness that ever lived on Earth, Robin is the only one that's mastered this ability to communicate across dimensions. In other words, this art form that she's presented for my edification has changed my perception about the limitations of organic beings and the possibility that death, in fact, is not only not a transition that's final, that it's in fact the beginning of a process that's not final, and maybe that process can loop around and people can be reborn at will in 3 dimensions. And all of that in the last 6 years. So there's been an absolutely trackable change. And then, of course, I'm looking at really big scales, like seeing consciousness facial images in interstellar nebula that are light years across. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, because Joseph Farrell has independently looked at these plasmas and come to the same conclusion, that beings that are left brain, rational, scientific, can use this external stimuli to prompt a change of consciousness in 3 dimensions, which I think is the intent of the art from the get-go. It's not to appeal only to people who are there, it's to bring people who are not there to where they're there. Otherwise, it makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Sure.
Which means a portion of our skeptics tonight in the audience if they're following this conversation, will hopefully look at this presentation from a rationalistic scientific point of view and ask the question, if these guys aren't nuts, what can I, as an individual, learn from this that might help me better navigate the world?
Well, that's where I come in. I feel like I'm a messenger because they found somebody that could hear and I'm listening. So they're like, okay, show them this, show them this. Go look here. They direct me around not just the earth,
See,
but
nobody's talked to me about any of this. It's all been because Robin died and then set up a mechanism to let me know A, she's still there, B, she still gives a damn, and C, there's something important to tell me.
yeah.
Okay, let's go on with your images. Let's try to get through as many as possible because you've got lots of examples. And
Okay.
part of the audience is going to want lots of evidence before they will open their mind just a bit to say, maybe these guys aren't crazy.
Yeah. Let's go to number 8, item 8. Now my goal is I see that the Sphinx has been defaced and they wanted it to look like body of a lion and they defaced the monument because I can tell they changed it and I know it was different. So I went looking at the older pictures. I got to find when they first dug it up. I want to see what it looks like before they screwed it all up. So number
Well,
8
remember,
is,
because of the enclosure, it's been buried most of its life in sand
yeah,
that fills in, drifts in that cavity in the mesa. So the body has not been touched by
right.
erosion for most part, but the head is exposed, and the
Yeah.
head, from other evidence, we think was recarved at some point in its long history.
So I found these older pictures. You can see they've dug it out quite a bit there in item 8, and I can see from that I'm like, okay, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. This is infinity art. This makes sense. I'm seeing this is what it should be. And go to number 9.
Well, wait. Let's not leave number 8 yet. The bottom half of number 8, which is a 3/4 view of the Sphinx with two Egyptians, 3 actually there in front, and a couple perched on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the right menes, which is the technical term for his headdress, the Sphinx's headdress.
Thank you.
What do you
And
see? Right
we're
between the
looking at the
pyramid,
ridge, the
right? No,
pyramid
no,
in
no,
the
no, no, no,
background.
no, no,
You
no, no,
have the
no.
corner
Look
of
at
the
the
pyramid.
look at the pyramid, and then to the left of the pyramid, there's the headdress, the menes.
I know
It's
what you're
called.
talking about. I want to tell you what it is. So, the right side of the headdress, you have the ridge and you have the face. There is actually many faces. And I paint many of these in the documentary. So, you have this same ridge that is on the pyramids. Pyramids have 4 ridges, 4 corners. And I think that's depicting, as far as the historical value, either the 4 quadrants of the Orion arm of the galaxy or the 4 quadrants of the galaxy. I don't know, but I think that's the pyramid is these 4 corners. You have this ridge, and the ridge line, you want to see that as the center line of a person's face, a front profile. It comes down, over the nose and down. So that ridge is a mid
Well, I
face.
see in the right headdress, the menes at this angle,
Yep,
I see a left eye, I see a nose, I see a mouth,
yep.
I see a chin
Hmm.
caused by the shadows when this photo was taken. By the way, you've unearthed some amazingly good ancient pictures, ancient in terms of modern history, really stunning copies. But I'm obviously seeing a face there now.
Yeah,
The pareidolia would say, oh, you're just seeing things. I'm
unfortunately.
wondering if long before it was tampered with, this is not something we were meant to see because it was meant to reaffirm the Jonathan Womack model.
It's such a tragedy that we dismiss this stuff. These are them. This is us. Now let's go to number 9. Again, I'm looking at the Sphinx when it was first dug out to confirm my theory that this is actually infinity art. It's a monument, Orion monument. Number 9, let's look at the bottom half of item
Oh, I
9.
was more intrigued with the top because it looks like to be a hole in the top of the head, which could
Yeah,
be a hat with a base, a kind of a knob stuck in that hole that kept it on it. So where is the headdress on the top that sat in that hole?
there was none. Nope, that is an acoustical chamber, light chamber. It's one of these chambers I'm going to focus on in my third documentary. You see these all over the Western US and all over the Earth. They're immaculate. These chambers are such a technological marvel. As the Earth moves, Sphinx is vibrating. It's putting out sound. We don't hear it, but there's all this stuff going on. And that
So you're saying it was made to resonate with the torsion field?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to point this out on the bottom half of item 9. I want you to look at the Sphinx head, and it's the left side of the headdress. You see the corner. One side is light, one side is shadow. Do you see what I'm talking about? The headdress?
Yep, I see it.
Yeah. Well, that's another face. There's an eye and a nose and a mouth. Now look at the corner of the pyramid that's facing us. It's the same representation. They use these corners to make faces. There's 1,000 faces in the Sphinx and 1,000 in the pyramid. It's all these faces we're supposed to see. And they catch the light in a way, and it creates shadows and all this. It's really incredible. And like I say, I go into great detail and effort to bring this out in the documentary. That's the main thing I want to point out about item 9 is that that part of the headdress is just they're using that art technique of a ridge to depict a human face, just like the pyramid corner. You see how the Sphinx body, it's not the body of a lion, this is segmented, and this matches with my infinity art model. Because as you rotate around the Sphinx or the Sphinx in the pyramid and all this, you're going to get the matching factor comes into play where things line up and you see different faces, and it's just more confirmation. It's art on a scale that it's hard to wrap your mind around. But when I saw these old pictures, I was like, aha, I knew it.
These are great old pictures. Let's go to number 10 because the top of it, which is replicated of number 8, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, number 8, bottom number 8. If you look at the pyramid, do you see that little white line that comes down and
Thank you.
That is the 8-sided faces of the Great Pyramid that were only photographed from the air in 1942 near, I think, the equinox. And scholars have claimed you can't see any other time. Well, this 1800s image, whenever it was taken, they did it at just the right time of day to where you can actually see there's a bifurcation of that face of the pyramid, face not being human face, but, planar geometric triangle. And it's bifurcated in 2, meaning there are 8 sides to the Great Pyramid, not 4.
And look at the shadowed side of the pyramid.
Oh, I can see a slight raised edge there.
Yep.
We need a bigger version of this picture. Do you have, by the way, background data? Who took this, when, et cetera, et cetera?
This is circa 1903.
But by whom?
Oh, I don't know.
Because it'd be nice to find
it's
the original.
Written on the bottom left, but it's very hard to read it. Yeah, it's written.
It would be nice to find the original negative.
I tried. Yeah, it would be, because I tried to read that. I'm using all my...
this is on somebody's website, right? So somebody either got rights to this image or they purloined it and they got it from someplace, so we can track down, because I've never seen a surface picture showing the 8 faces of the Great Pyramid in such detail on a photo, ever.
Yeah, you can think of the pyramid as a crown to all those sand dune faces in front of it, between the Sphinx and the pyramid, all those sand dunes. And here's another face I'll throw at you. The corner shoulder of the Sphinx, where those 2 guys are sitting, that's the nose and the mouth, and the eyes of the face are actually the pyramid, and then on the left side of this photo, there's a rocky feature near the left edge. All these faces, the ground, all the sand, everything.
Well, the one on his back haunches, again, on the lion motif, that's pretty clear, even without your colorized version.
Cool.
And again, people, You need to open the mind to the possibility. That's all you have to do tonight. Just think about the possibility and then why. Why would consciousness do this on these repeating fractal scales unless the message was kind of really important for us
Really, yeah.
humans to get?
Let's quickly go. Oh, it's 2:30. It's the bottom of the hour.
Tell you what, let's blow past the bottom thing. Just keep going, okay?
Okay, number 11. There are many, many faces embedded. And I mentioned the Picasso self-portrait before, where they're sharing an eye.
In color in the middle between the two sphinxes.
Correct. They're sharing an eye. And that's what these
Well,
great
that's so
architects.
Martian art.
It's what?
Over and over and over again. It's
Oh,
Martian
yeah.
art.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
yeah.
Martian. It's
So
so
Martian.
Martian.
Yeah. Hopefully, if I did my job right, you can see that there are different faces that I've added some color to. And it's not just one face, there are many beings. You know,
Well,
this
let me
is
tell you one
history.
I'm looking at from this angle. The right mayonnaise, remember headdress of the Sphinx,
Yes.
looks like a two-dimensional, very primitive, heavy-browed,
Yep.
primitive, like Neanderthal or whatever.
Yeah. Is it a reptoid? I don't know what it is. It's somebody from some planet. There's this history. Yeah, there's all these different beings. There's a whole bunch of them.
Well, we need to do a systematic, we, Kemosabe meaning you. Well, this is your project.
Yeah, yeah.
You need to ferret out original negatives of original archives taken as early as photography, as daguerreotype photography allowed, because the earlier photos we can get, the more pristine the images on the Sphinx alone seem to become.
In the middle section of item 11, these effigies are animated. As the sun goes by, they will open their mouth to sing. I don't know if they're singing a vow or it's this creation story is the most common theme. You can see
Well, wait.
the left side.
We don't know what they're singing. Maybe just the singing is because ultimately it's all about frequency.
They're seeking a frequency and it's creating. This is creation. They're making, they're creating, they're singing. There's different depictions of their mouths. They'll be singing, blowing, breathing
Well, remember
fire.
the Old Testament, the creation motif in the old Judaic Christian Testament, and the word was made flesh. That's a metaphor for frequency creates three-dimensional conscious being. Frequency metaphor.
And that mouth.
The physics is about frequency, as we're going to talk about when we tomorrow night lay out the pyramid experiments that we did with Stephen Sipes' pyramid in Canada.
If you look at it a certain way, you can see that they're singing, and the whole back of the Sphinx headdress are these reptoids with their mouth open going, ah. And let's go to number 12. These are very important slides where I'm showing that I'm looking at the Sphinx face and I notice it has these horizontal grooves that are very prominent and that they are match lines. So I take the face of the Sphinx and I match those lines. Sure enough, they match up with delicate arch. I've circled delicate arch in green and the Sphinx face in green. So delicate arch, you can see that the right side of it is this partial face. I keep talking about these fractured faces where it's like having a bust and then they take part of it away. Why would they do that? To make it in a greater context by having background art fill in that. So when you overlay the Sphinx face on delicate arch, it matches up perfectly with the lines of there's like a retaining wall behind
well, didn't you say the geology at delicate arch was 150 million years?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 150 million. We've got 4,500 for the Egypt that we think is ancient Egyptian, although I think the Sphinx is much older.
Yes.
So we have a continuity that extends across hundreds of millions of years in your model.
Yes.
With the same motif, the same significators, the same message?
Same message, same everything. It's just trying to get our attention. The Sphinx and Pyramids are
Boy,
like
they're
a
patient.
uh,
Ah!
more of a, I dare say pedestrian, not pedestrian because the Sphinx and the Pyramids are incredible infinity fractal art, but they're more user friendly. Like they wanted us to.
Well, wait. We touched on this before because in my model, Earth consciousness goes up and down with the precessional cycle, which matches the Yuga cycles, where you've got golden ages, silver ages, and then the dumb idiots of the current Kali Yuga. But if the message is constant and of the same content over immense periods of time, and Earth time, because of the changing physics, is cyclic, so that conscious beings come in and leave at different points in the song. If you pick up the motif when you come in, it's like playing over and over and over again, so you can match the resonance and pick up the message at almost any time when you come in to this 3D experience. Is
Hmm,
that fair? Is that valid?
yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. In number 13, item 13, these are stills from a documentary. I'm just moving the Google Earth camera, panning left, just sliding it to the right.
See,
And as you,
maybe you missed that part earlier in the show where you're basically taking the 3D Google Earth surface view and
Mhm,
you're able to rotate around it in 3 dimensions,
yeah,
X, Y, and Z, and then you can frame grab or you can produce it as a video so you can look at this in any geometric alignment and context in a computer model reproduced on Google Earth.
it'd be great to get some AI to help color all this stuff so people can see it. I've added a little bit of color. As you move around the camera, it's aligning with background features. You notice behind the delicate arch, you have this retaining wall. It has the slits and some vertical slots. That's all for matching purposes. So when you
Well,
rotate,
we have to go back to the fundamental question, why faces?
it's them and it's history. This is
Oh, no. Why faces? My model says that faces are the only way in 3 dimensions to represent individuality. The only way. And here's my proof. You know the story of dogs that have gotten separated from their families, from their humans for like a decade or more,
mhm.
and then they meet them again. Either they're brought together or someone found the chip and brought them back and all that. And the dog instantly recognizes their family member, knows them, even though a decade has passed. How do they recognize? My model says consciousness recognizes other consciousness in 3D by facial, 3-dimensional representational forms. Faces recognize individuals through faces.
Yeah, they want us to see them. So that's right.
But this
Faces.
represents identity. It's not just a random, like I'm going to
No.
pick one from column A. No, these represent the beings themselves at
Yes.
scales which in most people's imagination are inconceivable.
I've been trying to learn how to read the history that's embedded in this. And one of the ideas I had was if you were standing near delicate arch like we see here, and let's say you lift off the ground, you orbit the arch, and as you're orbiting, you ascend and your orbits become wider, and it's that sacred angle, the sacred spiral, do they call it? Is it?
The phi spiral,
Yes. And
the
you
golden mean,
and you get out by the time you get out
which is really,
to
really, really important in David Sarita's work because the golden mean is a fundamental constant allowing us to see all kinds of things we wouldn't see otherwise.
if you focus on one person, because it's so overwhelming in all the
Well,
faces,
the face appears to be constructed through golden mean proportions. Is that accident or is that hyperdimensional physics?
HD physics all day
I would
long.
argue it's the physics.
Absolutely. This is technology that is very hard to wrap your mind around, to say the
Arthur
least.
C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
If we go to item 14, it's just a few more examples. In my documentary, in this scene too, I get to where I call it Spock Rock because it kind of looks like Mr. Spock.
Really?
Yeah, I put a picture of Mr. Spock.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay,
Well, then I go,
hang on. It's time for another commercial. How can
okay.
people see the documentary?
They can go to Paraflix
And that is
platform.
linked next to your bio? Is it linked in this series of images?
I link it on my very last slide. You can click and it
Which
takes
is
you to
all the
Paraflix.
way down to number 29. Keith is incredibly patient. He posted 29 images tonight for
Thank you,
Jonathan.
Keith. Yes, I really appreciate that.
Oh, there it is. Ancient Architects of Orion. The irony. We are meant to see the art, the tragedy. We dismiss it as pareidolia.
It is tragic. Okay, where was I? Number 14. Yes, let's go to number 15. One of the techniques for seeing this art, it's psychoactive. It connects with your mind and your spirit, actually. Have you ever looked at pictures of Mars where you're looking down at the surface from above and you see a feature and you think it's a mound, and then you read the caption and you realize it's a crater? But when you first saw it,
a very classic bubble versus concavity illusion.
yes, concave versus convex. And they use this technique to create these illusions. You kind of have to learn. I mean, we've been taught not to see this effect, illusion, whatever you want to call it. They want us to see this.
What do you mean we've been taught?
Or we've just been conditioned by society not to see these illusions. If you had this video the other day, I saw of these two couples at Zion National Park. They're at the lookout point over Angel Landing. It's beautiful, and it's all these faces. And the one guy says, "Hey, that looks like a huge face. It's like 600 feet tall." And the other dude says, "Oh, no, that's just natural for your mind to see faces. It's not. That's natural."
Tracing back to my good friend Carl. Carl did more damage to science. I mean, the worst thing he ever said was extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. I mean, that's really pernicious. That's a dagger in the heart of real science, because real science should not limit an idea to, oh, that idea is extraordinary and that one's mundane. Where does the subjective psychology of, oh, that idea is too crazy to be true, ever come in? In a universe of infinite extent, which is what the cosmologists are now arguing, that means there's infinite possibilities. So nothing, given enough time in infinity, is impossible. Nothing. Axiomatically, nothing is impossible. The trick is to figure out that which is probable versus that which is improbable. Not the same thing.
We're taught when you look at Porcupine Ridge from Castle Valley, you see this concave area. But what we're supposed to see in this beautiful, incredible art is that there's this kind of three-dimensional illusion of it's not a crater, it's a mound. And so I've added some color, and hopefully you see this kind of face sticking out, bluish face and the dark blue helmet. And it's the same character from the pyramid headdress. And then I do the same thing in item 17. There's 1,000 faces there in this. So I'm just adding some color in the hopes that people will see this. Instead of seeing the crater, they'll see it as a mound. This is your mind. This is the psychoactive part of it, where you want to see the mound, not the crater. Look at it like it's a mound. And it takes practice.
Let me ask you a very pointed, direct question.
Yeah.
Can this be seen easier if your mind has a little help? You know exactly what I'm asking.
Yes, and I experimented with acid when I was younger because
no. I'm not talking. I'm talking like pot, marijuana, because
sure.
Very frankly, I found that from time to time to use it as a tool to see things that are at the verge of consciousness
Yeah.
It reduces barriers and allows you to see that
Yes.
which you really can't see unless you retune, because that's what this chemistry does. It retunes your mind.
Yeah, that can be helpful. But you don't have to have that. You don't have to have any drugs or anything to see this. But it takes practice to see the mound instead of the crater. You can get good at it. After 2 years, I see all this concave stuff and I go, oh, that's actually, it's a mound and I see this face, So the
We got
practice,
less than 15 minutes left. Come on, come on. We've gone
okay,
over that. Number
okay.
18.
Number
That's
18,
an amazing picture. Where'd you get that?
once I saw these pictures of the Sphinx dug out, it confirmed my theory that this has all been defaced and changed, and this was original infinity art. I thought, man, I wish I had a 3D model of this 1903 Sphinx so I could use my 3D camera to orbit the Sphinx and just enjoy the facial matching that's I know is going to happen when I do that. And good Lord, I couldn't believe it. I went to Sketchfab, one of my favorite sites for 3D models, and I'm looking, and then boom, there it was, the 1903 Sphinx. It was made by a group in England called the Watt Institute, WATT, Watt Institute. And shout out to them because I was so happy to see this. So I immediately downloaded it, imported it into my software. I use a bunch of different softwares, but my favorites are Element 3D and After Effects. This is the 3D model. The top part, I just took a still frame and added some color. The golden area is a face, one of 1,000, and it's wearing the darker shaded headdress. You see that the back of the Sphinx is very different from what we see today. It's not a lion. They added lion's paws for the back, and they added all this stuff. They covered over, this is different pieces of stone, and they made it one piece. So the whole thing, they kind of trashed it. All right, so the middle part of item 18,
Well, let's be very clear. In your model, they trashed it. I could
yeah,
look at that and say it's incredibly old. It's infinitely older than the pyramids. It's part of the original architectural ground plan, which I've measured at 250,000 years old, which is important because that matches Sidonia. And you're looking at episodes where it was exposed, and the exposure has so deformed the Yardang, the mesa that was originally recarved to represent this being, this animal human hybrid, like the face on Mars is hominid feline hybrid, that it's not deliberate defacing, it's just incredibly ancient. And some of the earliest photographs captured it before restorers, good meaning idiots, tried
yeah.
to restore it to where it's lost its incredibly important original meaning, models from Jonathan notwithstanding.
Yeah, I didn't mean I meant people restoring it. They're actually defacing. They mean well, but they are defacing it by, you know.
Well, all of them except Zahi. Zahi really is trying to obscure things. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, so the middle one is I'm trying to show that the back part is a dragon because the dragons are featured all over Earth. They are super important in this creation process. I
So
added
wait,
some,
wait, in the front of you, number one, the top, those don't look like paws, they look like claws.
don't
Come,
get me,
dragon's claws. Be consistent.
well, there are many faces and beings depicted in this monument. I'm trying to show just a
By the way,
one dragon.
you can even see the so-called inventory stela between the paws or claws in
In
front
the
of the
top. Yeah.
chest
Yeah.
in the top and the bottom view. Boy, this is an amazingly important photograph from 1903, and these guys deserve incredible credit for
Yeah.
doing a 3D rendering. Maybe we should talk to them about doing other 3D renderings of things on other planets.
Yeah. And you should see in the middle section with the purple dragon, it's wearing this headdress that is actually the face of these reptoids, and they're singing. You have left-facing reptoids, right profiles. In the bottom, an important feature I'm showing in the bottom section is that as you orbit the Sphinx, the area that I've colored in yellow gold and a brown crown, you can see an example of matching. I put kind of a teal colored eyes, two ellipses for the eyes and one for the mouth. The right eye is part of the Sphinx humanoid face. And you only see this face when you're looking at it from this
So
angle.
just to be clear, the 3D image produced by this English group is basically beige with shades of gray, right? Black and white.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And you added all the color.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, just so we know.
Here's another example in slide 19. We're looking at the other side of the
We're going to get to
Sphinx.
19.5 here tonight, guys.
Here's another example where you have the two green eyes. I'm looking at the top part of item 19.
Right.
Two green eyes. The left eye is actually part of the humanoid.
You've done a really good comparison in the second tier one, because I do that a lot. I do the raw image on the left and the whatever I'm trying to point out on the right.
Yeah. Hopefully you can see how it's matching as your view orbits the monument, and that's part of infinity.
I don't want to put her on the spot. She said she might be able to be with us for the whole show or might not. But I'm just wondering, is Cynthia, as the professional artist that she is, she just sold a painting for 10 grand. If she's looking at this and seeing what we're seeing, and she doesn't have to come on, if she doesn't want to, she can stay ambiguous in the background, but I'd be very curious to know if she has an opinion about what we're trying to point out here. And absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So we will move on. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go to, and I'll just mention the triangle lips. It's a feature I see around a lot. I don't know if this is the mouth of these reptoids, but I just see this triangle feature a lot, and it's a feature of some kind of being from that's different from us. And
unless, remember, mouth is expression, mouth is frequency, mouth is vibration, mouth is communication. The triangle you're seeing here in 2 dimensions is a 3-dimensional tetrahedron, which says the physics is communication, the physics is frequency, the frequency is creation.
Okay, let's go to number 20.
You have no response to that.
Well, I want to get a couple more slides in before the end. Item 21, as I was looking at the left side.
This is Mars. Yes, this is Curiosity.
And we've been looking at the Sphinx head and the left side of the Sphinx headdress. So I'm going, oh my gosh, I remember that triangle.
This is what I call the Parker marker, which again is an equilateral triangle of the physics, but it appears to be a Martian version of a national park where someone put up little signs indicating for Martian tourists millions of years ago, this is what this means, this is who did it, etc. And we've lost all the context, except they are so artificial and they look like reliefs, hieroglyphs, engravings that I just think they're park markers.
Imagine the other side of that triangle, and imagine the light coming through that archway behind it, which is a similar shape. The light would come through and light up the back of this. So I'd love to see the back of this. And
we don't see the other side. They haven't shown it to us.
Yes.
I wonder why.
I zoom in a bit on that in the next few items, like 22.
Yes.
Yeah. And my third documentary is going to focus on these immaculate chambers. We would go in there and we would be flabbergasted to see there's going to be all this art of these beautiful effigies, and the lights come in and the constellations would come up at night and shine in. It's just all this stuff going on. It's so cool. And then the last few slides I was just trying to match the lines of the Pacific Ocean floor and the Atlantic Ocean floor.
So you're looking at really huge planetary geoglyph resculpturing.
Yes, and does the match lines on the Sphinx face?
No one could ever accuse you of a lack of imagination. Ever. Yeah. If anybody says, point them at me, I'll sock them in the jaw. Okay.
So that's pretty much it. And item 28, the last one, is just a video I made of this model, and I put a globe of the Earth around it, and I did Mars too. I had to see if these matching
Okay,
lines of the
we
Sphinx.
got 45 seconds. How can people see your documentary again?
Go to paraflix.com.
Super. Well, I want to thank my guest this morning, Jonathan Womack, for thinking big, expanding our imagination, and hopefully some of you will look at his representations, his art, his reconstructions, his model, and if you see even a fraction of what we've been talking about tonight, let him know. His website is on the other side of midnight. His contact info is on the other side of midnight. His model and his science and his art is on the other side of midnight. And on that note, tomorrow night, we're changing gears slightly. We're going to be talking about the hyperdimensional experiments we were privileged to conduct in Stephen Sipes' analog to the Great Pyramid at Giza, a 60-foot base pyramid made of the same limestone as the Great Pyramid in Egypt is constructed from. So until tomorrow night, same time, same bat channel, third star on the left, straight until morning. Good night, everyone.